All right, we pick up today with Shemot, which is known as Exodus, chapter 21, verse 15. But to recap, my translation of verse 14 was, "And if a man rage with his close friend and slay him with guile, he shall be taken from the place where God resides." Remember, that was a idiom because it said he'll be taken from my altar. So he'll be taken from the place where God resides and be put to death. Said some things about it, but the main thing that I wanted to repeat was where it says he'll be taken from my altar. Because it says my altar, some of the sages took it to mean that no one, not even the Kohanim, the priests, could find refuge if he was a murderer, which would indicate that without this law, a Kohen, a priest, could have committed murder, giving also the idea that the Kohanim were somehow above the rest of the people. Thus, the sages that went down this road were just a little bit off on this one. There is an equivalent saying, "I will erase his name from the book of life." It's way more serious than maybe previously thought. Death in biblical terms is equal to separation from God. This is why some crimes, like murder, actually come with a physical death sentence, while other crimes come with a spiritual death sentence. This is a law that is beyond the physical death sentence. If he murders a man, that's going to be a death sentence with it. So why then say this? Because this is something that's further is murder. This man let himself become so enraged with a close friend, with somebody else who was a Jew, an observant Jew like himself. They let things get so out of control that he murdered this man out in rage. And because of that, not only is he put to death, he dies the death. He is separated from God eternally, if you will. That's pretty serious stuff. So then we move into today's verse, which is verse 15, and literally in English it would say, "And strike father his and mother he die." Okay, so it starts off umakeh, which is to strike, to smite, to slap with the hand, to double up with the fist, to swing, hit with a bat, with a hammer, with a board. It doesn't make any difference. It's to strike, to hit something or someone in this case. And this is aviv. So it's if he strikes his father. Now, it's not going to make any difference if he strikes him with his hand, his fist, and as one sage says, his words, because to disrespect the parent was to strike them with your words. And these words actually do indicate that. But the father is what you think of in this case. We're talking about more than just his father. We're talking about if he's grown up and he's gone to school and he decides to strike his teacher, that teacher has become his father, right? And so it would cover that as well. But the intention here is of his father, the person who fathered him. And then the next thing it says is ve'imo, so it's his father and his mother. In Hebrew, they don't have that same idea of someone being your mother like they do a father. The father is the teacher. The father can be the king. The father can be a lot of different things. But they didn't have that same idea with a mother. But then it says mot, which is die. It's to be killed. It's to stop breathing. It's what you think of. Then it says yumat. And by the way, that's the same word. It's just so it's die, he die. So the translation then becomes and I have to add he who, so you'll understand what it means in English. And he who strikes his father and mother, die, he die. Now in the English it says so that they die, he will be put to death or he will die, right? It doesn't say that if you strike your parent such that they die. The words are simply not there in the Hebrew. It's an idiom, die, he die. So if he strikes his father or his mother or any child, you remember it's written in the masculine, so this can be of the daughter or the son. If they strike their father or their mother, they will be cut off from God and country. It's not that they're going to receive a death sentence. How does someone receive a death sentence for striking their parent? Well, because the law says if you kill somebody, you receive a death sentence, right? So if you murder your parents, you receive a death sentence. But if you strike your parents, you're cut off from the people. You're cut off from, obviously this is about the Jews. So you're cut off from the Jewish people and you're cut off from the Jewish God. So you're sent out of the land. The word strikes, the Mechilta in the Babylonian Talmud and Sanhedrin 84b, both describe a strike to be a blow that draws blood and or causes a bruise, even if no one dies. Keep in mind, the text does not say that the father or mother dies from the strike. It only says that they were struck. And where it says die, he die, Rashi and Rashbam pointed out that the parents did not have to die for the child to receive the death sentence. Not so. I utterly agree with this. You get a death sentence for murder. You do not get a death sentence here. But remember, these are men who probably did not speak Hebrew at all. It's not very likely, and they were absolutely, for sure, westernized. And so if they did speak Hebrew, it was nothing more than the Spanish language with Hebrew words. It had become that Western. So everything they took everything literally, and then they added some words that they die, right? So anyway, they're way off. Even Ezra believed that a child who cursed his parents should receive the death sentence, since cursing was striking with the mouth. Well, if we're talking about the death sentence such that you are cut off from God and country, that's what this death sentence is. It's not a physical death, it's a spiritual death. To that end, I would agree, but to the end of someone being put to death because they, cursed their parents, no, it doesn't say that. So moving on to verse 16, literally in English, it would say, and steal man, and sell he, and acquire in hand he, dead he die, or die he die. You've heard this idiom before. So it says vegonev, which is and steal. It's to take by theft. It's to take secretly. It's use of the word for secrets because you're stealing the truth. So if he steals ish, if he steals a man, as opposed to a woman, it's literally that. Umeharo, and he sell. So now he's stolen somebody. Think about this happened in their world. There's a really famous Jew whose brother sold him. Right? Anybody remember who that was? His name was Joseph, or Joseph, as most people know him, and his many-colored. What was that? Multicolored coat. Yeah, that guy, Joseph. His brother sold him. So, here's a law that might get them in trouble. And so if they steal this man and they sell him, which essentially when they sold him, they stole him and sold him. This is ve'nim za, and acquire. It's to come to attain. They've attained something. They've attained something in their hand. In other words, they've acquired money. It doesn't have to be money. Okay, so you sell this guy for 2 mules and a bottle of milk. You acquired something in your hand for the purchase of this person. That's what's being said. And it says, mot, you mot. Heard it before? There's your idiom. So he who steals a man and sells him and receives some sort of payment. I've got that in little brackets so you know that that's not really there, but he receives a payment in his hand. Then it says, he will be cut off from God and country. Die, he will die. So you don't get a death sentence for this, but you will be kicked out of your country, and you will have your name erased from the book of life. It's really serious. This, to the Jewish world, was way more serious than someone being put to physical death for something. Nachmanides thought that in his hand referred to the buyer. But if he were right, then the text would have indicated which man should be put to death. There would have had to been some who gets put to death over this, or that both men should. He is thus wrong in his assessment. The hand is in reference then to the seller who is to be put to death for his crime, or, as I said, he dies the death. He's to be sent out of Israel, and he's to be cut off from the people forever. I mean, you're cut off from your wife, your children, your mother, your father, your aunts, your uncles, your cousins. All you're cut off, and this is dying the death. This is forever. This is as long as you live. You can't come back. Rashi wrote that when the method of death was not indicated, the method was strangulation. Remember, this is a guy who's completely westernized and has no idea what Hebraic thought is. He was wrong, of course. When the method of death is not indicated, the death is spiritual, not physical. The death means that the man was to be sent out of the land of Israel, to be cut off from all of his family, and never to return to Israel or God. This is, biblically speaking, utter death. Just think about it. If you're cut off from Israel for a week, for instance, during the Pesach, if you eat leaven, you're cut off from Israel for the rest of the week, right? Like if it's 2 days in, it's the rest of that time of the Pesach, you're cut off from Israel, cut off from your people. You can't have anything to do with them, right? And they can't have anything to do with you. But at the end of that week, you get to come back. So you died, but you didn't die the death. I hope you get it. In verse 17, literally it would say, and diminish father his and mother he died. This is really important here. Umekalel, it's and diminish. It's to be light, opposite of heavy, to be diminished, to cease from, to disregard, to disgrace parents or teachers by following a different way, to be despised, to show contempt, to run away from, which is probably the primary signification of the word. You're fleeing from. So if your parents have raised you to be Jewish and you go off and become a Christian, do you see now why Jews go out and buy a burial plot and a casket and have a funeral? It's that law right there. So it's to diminish, is to cease from. So you cease from what they've raised you to be, but to disgrace or disregard your parents or your teacher, because your teacher is your parent as well, by following a different way. But I don't know that we can tie it to much else than, but it's to show contempt, to this is one of the things that so many Jews are so guilty of. Their ancestors, think about it, our ancestors lost their lives. They were tortured, they were beaten, they were cruelly treated, and they hung on to their religion, they hung on to their God. And then their children today, the vast majority of the Jews who live in Israel today are atheists. They are guilty of this very sin. They are disgracing their parents and their teachers. They are following after a different way. They are being the opposite of their parents. They're fleeing from what their parents, because their parents go all the way back to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right? Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Those are their parents. And everybody in between are their parents, because your parents are the ones that went before you. So you see how serious this is. So Aviv, I've got that spelled wrong in English, but it's Aviv is the word. That's why I put the Hebrew in there in case I type it wrong. An ancestor, a grandfather, a great-grandfather, used of the founder or first ancestor of a nation. There's an example in Jacinius in Bereshit, also known as Genesis, 4:21, the father of all who handle the harp and pipe. So this is the guy who invented the harp and the pipe that they're talking about. and they call him the father of the harp and the pipe. He's the founder of the family of music, inventor of the art of music. That's who they were talking about. Of an author or maker of anything. So the books that I've written, I'm the father of those books. But you get the idea. That's why it goes all the way back to Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. They are the fathers of the Israel, of the Jewish nation. But the idea of father as one who nourishes is not found in the biblical text. That idea did not exist back then. That whole idea of using the word Abba as in daddy, and the closeness and the relationship and the intimate, care between the father and the child. No, no, no. That did not exist in the biblical period, not even a little bit. It's why the story of Joseph stands out, and the sons cannot understand why the father loved this child so much and why he was so tender and caring toward his last two children, because it wasn't just Joseph. But they couldn't understand that, because that kind of tenderness from a man to a child did not exist. So we're not looking at that sort of a thing here. This is Ve'imo and his mother. So Mut, Yamut, die he die. Here we go again. So the translation is, and turn from the way, that's to diminish, and turn from the way, his father and mother, he will be cut off from God and country. Well, it's kind of automatic, isn't it? If your parents are living by Judaism and you decide to be an atheist, have it off from your God and your country. Only goes a little further. The countrymen are supposed to cut themselves off from their family members. Utterly. So, Rashi excluded minors since he believed that a child shouldn't actually be put to death for this offense. Because again, they're taking everything literally, and they think someone's actually going to be put to death for something this. Really? A death sentence for this? Anyway, Casuto said, one who commits any act contrary to the honor due to the parents. And I think that's an overstatement of the scope of this verse, but I'll let you defer to him if you like to, because he was a really, really brilliant man. Okay, then we move on. Yeah, we got plenty of time. Move on to verse 18, which literally in English is, and if quarrel men and strike man at intimate friend he, with stone or with fist, and not he die, and soul to lie down. Okay, so this is obviously going to be a little bit different than the one we started with, right? Vehi, so it's and if, or and because men will fight, right? You can say it that way and probably be more accurate. Yeah, rivun, if they quarrel, it's to contend, to strive. Properly, it is to seize one another by the hair, to pull, to rend. This is a cat fight, people. It is used in its proper signification of those who can contend with the hand with blows. They're punching each other. And of those who strive with words, they're arguing at the top of their lungs, especially to contend forensically, to plead a cause. Use of persons whose cause is pleaded. And that's a little off the beaten path. Doesn't really hold up here. Anashim, that's men, right? It's sort of two men instead of one man. There's two men are striving. Vehika, to smite, to strike, used mostly in the sense of hurting, because you could strike a nail with a hammer, right? That wouldn't hurt. It shouldn't hurt anybody. I got hurt doing that once recently. But I'm just saying, yeah, it's intended in this case for, the one struck the other man and hurt him, because the next word is ish. So two men are striving with each other. One of them strikes one of them. Then it says Re'ehu. This is intimate friend. This is companion. These are two men who know each other better than they know themselves. You know what I mean? They can finish each other's sentences. This isn't just two strangers. These are two good friends. Be'even, with his fist, or fist. I was going to say Evan is a stone. Yep, a stone of any kind. I don't know why I have fist in there. It's a stone, whether rough or polished, doesn't make any, large or small, doesn't make any difference. You hit him with a rock. Um, then it says the word O in Hebrew, just O. We would spell it OH in English. O, it means or. This or that. Get it? The egrof, there's your fist. So if he hits him with a rock or with his fist, velo, and not yamut, and the guy does not die. Venafal, it's and soul, literally, to fall. The primary sense is to cause to fall, to supplant. Use of a man falling to the ground, or falling from a horse or a seat, falling into a snare, falling in battle, to fall by a sword. Now, we already know that he didn't fall like as in battle. He didn't die, so that one's not really going to apply that particular usage of it. But it is used in that if he's fallen sick, so it's like he's down for the count because he got beat up so bad. What other things are used? I don't know. That's probably all that really needs to be said about the word. Then it says lemishkav, to lie down. It's to lie down both for sleep and from sickness. All right, so it's and if men quarrel and a man strike an intimate friend with a stone or with his fist, but he does not die, but his soul lies down. It's an idiom, right? His soul lies down. What does it mean his soul lies down? If normally you'd think, well, if his soul lies down, he's dead, right? But no, it's already said that he didn't die. But his soul lies down. He's disabled. Now, it doesn't mean it's a permanent disability. He's just disabled. Rashi said that a price was to be paid to cover the loss of time during the disablement and also for the medical costs. Well, we haven't gotten into that. That's, I think, in the next verse, but we haven't gotten into it, but he is correct. Kasudal said that this verse included the use of weapons. He thought it to be an archaic expression from the time when weapons were made of flint stones. Not as in meet the flint stones, but a stone made, a stone that is of flint as opposed to what's lava. Anyway, I believe he's probably right. I looked at his research on that, and it's really interesting. I really probably should have read you some of that research, but it's very interesting research where he got the idea of the weapons being made from stones out of, flint stones, and because it was a rock. So if you hit him with a flint stone, he hit him with a weapon. So I think I have to agree with him on that one. But if you want to know more, just get his book on Exodus, and it's in there under this verse, by the way. So if we move on to 19, in English, it's if he rise and travel in outside, on staff he, and acquitted the strike altogether, loss he give, and heal he heal. That makes some sense, right? So it starts off with if, that's if, for, because. Yakom, if he rise, it's to arise from a seat, from a bed. So he's beat him up, and for some time at least, he's down for the count. He's laying in a bed because, man, he's beat up bad. From a bed, so it's to arise from a bed, from there's added sense of urgency of purpose, to arise against anyone, to go forth, to arise from your bed and go forth is the idea from this word. What's something else that we might say that would be I don't see anything else that would be helpful. So the next word is vehi tehalech, and travel. So if he's been beat up, he's not dead. He's been in a bed for a while, but now he's going to rise up onto his feet and he's going to travel. It's to go, to walk, uh, to go through and over places, to go from point A to point B, right? So he's able to get up and he's going to walk. Bahutz, it says in outside. Properly, it's a wall, hence especially the outside of a house. Whatever is without, outside of the house, to walk on the street, to walk through the city, to walk through a field in the country, through the desert, out the doors. You get the idea. This is all which is upon Mish Anto, staffy. So even if he has to do it with a staff, so he's been beat up, he's been in a bed, but now he's getting up and he's using a staff or crutches, if you will, to get around. So even if it's on that, then he has to lean on it. Benika, it says, and acquitted. It's to be pure, to sprinkle water of purification, properly to purge. So he is being purged as if an offering has been made for his sin, if you will. Ha makeh. He's purged of the strike. Remember, these are close friends this happened to, not two strangers. So that he's purged of the actual strike. Then it says rock. He's purged of it altogether. There's, it's over. Then it says sheave toe, lossy, cessation, a ceasing, hence idleness, inactivity, interrupted, interruption of work, time lost. So here's where Rashi's getting his idea that you have to pay for the loss of time. Yitin, he will give it back. So if this man has been down for a week before he can get up and go back to work, that man owes him a week's salary. Whatever that week's salary would have been, that's what that man owes him now. He has to, if he has to see a doctor, that man has to pay for the doctor's bills because that's all part of this, right? Then it says that rapo and heal. This is where it starts to cover everything. Properly to sew together to mend from the sense of seizing and plucking. The root imitates the sound of a person sewing rapidly. To heal properly a wounded person, which is done by sewing up the wound. A sick person, metaphorically. God is said to heal a person and a people and a land. But anyway, you get the idea. So heal, yeah, rape, he will heal. So remember, when they say it twice, it's either an idiom or it's, and even in the idiom, it's to add the emphasis. So he will utterly heal, which this is where it goes from, he doesn't just pay back the time. Now he has to pay back all of the cost that was incurred. So now if the man had to go to the doctor and he has doctor bills, you have to pay that man's doctor bills and you have to pay that man the money he would have made while he was down for the count. So here's my translation of verse 19. If he, speaking of the injured man, arise and travel about outside on a staff, he, the person who struck the man, will be cleared of the strike. He's not cleared and just gets to walk away. He's cleared of the strike. He will be cleared of the strike. But he will altogether give what the man has lost. He will restore everything to him. That's what, and heal, he heal. It's, he will restore everything to that man. Rashi said the staff meant that upon that which man relied. In other words, his physical strength. He obviously felt that a man should not be acquitted of a crime if his victim was anything less than as he was before the crime. However, the Hebrew text does not leave the perpetrator of this crime without punishment, in that the perpetrator will pay for the rest of the man's life if he doesn't actually recover completely. He will utterly heal, he will give everything back. So if this man is now going to, not able to do the job that he used to do, and now he has to do some kind of menial labor. You got to make up the difference for the rest of his life. And this is what happened. That's why you get such high amounts of money and lawsuits and stuff like that, because it's supposed to cover the damages that are now lost for the rest of your life. This is where we get all this in our law. It comes from stuff like this. Rashi also believed that the perpetrator should be held in prison until it was known if the man would live, as evidenced by his ability to walk, even if it is with a crutch. But this law makes no such ruling. Though if he's the head of the Sanhedrin at the time, they could put this through. They could make this their ruling, and it would be lawful. But the text doesn't hold up. Rashi believed that the man should have to repay this man's losses at a rate equal to that of a man who had to work with the disability the victim now suffers. This is ludicrous. The perpetrator should have to pay at the rate the man was able to make before his injury. This of these words. Onkelos, the Mechilta, Nachmanides, and Saadia believed that if a man could walk around, even if only by a staff, it indicated that he was healed. What? Have we forgotten God's law altogether? If a man is struck, that he die. I'm just thinking out loud here. Once a man can get around, even if it is with a crutch, it is evidence that he did not die from the strike. That's all that is. The perpetrator is then, and only then, acquitted of the strike, but not the injury or the costs incurred because of it. All right, let's move on to verse 20. Literally in English, and because strike man, male servant he, or female servant he, with rod, and die under hand he punished. Okay, so it's vechi, and because, or because it's going to happen, right? And because it's going to happen, yakeish. So just should say yakeh, shouldn't say ish. Yakeh is our word. It's to strike, to punch with the fist, to slap with the hand, to hit with some kind of instrument of some sort, right? A man, ish. Our next word is man. So if he strikes a man, or if a man strikes rather, et avdo. If a man strikes male servant he, so it's if a man strikes his male servant. What verse are we on? Verse 20. Which one are we on at this point? I almost forgot something. Is this 20? Oh, good. I had a little something I wanted to go over here. So if he strikes his servant, I'm backing up on the wrong one. His male servant, a servant, it's a slave to a whole people and subject to tributary to another. So we're all slaves in America because we pay taxes. Yep, that's what a servant is. Servant to a king, his ministers and his courtiers, figuratively applied to various senses. A worshiper of God is his servant. So now we're saying, so if a man beats his servant, I'll read this in a minute. Then it's remember that's the word for or amato, a female servant, his handmaiden, ba shevet, with a rod. That's a stick, a staff, a rod. What it actually is, you could probably look this up on the internet if you like. In China, they still do this. They use cane poles to whip people, if you will, to hit them with these cane poles. This is exactly what the Jews did back then. Remember, this is the Middle East. The Jews are Orientals. All right, so it's a rod, it's a stick, a staff, it's a shepherd's rod, a scepter of a king is his rod. The tribe of the Israelites, their leaders, had a rod. It's even used of a spear, right? But that's not really what's meant here. But anyway, so think of a cane pole. Umet and die tahat, and the guy dies under yado, the hand, under his hand. So this is the master is beating the servant, and the servant dies, whether it's a woman or a man, the servant dies under his hand, because they say that because it's the man is doing it himself, or he has given the order for someone else to do it. That's under his hand. It's under his authority. Nakom, punished, to, it says to revenge. It's to avenge, to take vengeance, to be to inflict a penalty, that kind of thing. He will be avenged. Yinakim, he will be avenged. So here's the translation. If a man strike his male servant or his maid servant and they die, because he gave the order under his hand, he will absolutely be punished. He will be punished for this. Not for beating them, but for killing them. The text is speaking specifically of a master giving the order for a servant to be punished. The man who killed the servant, whether it is the master or another servant, will be put to death. It's because the person who actually did it will be put to death. Verse 12, he that strikes a man that he die shall be put to death. However, if a man gave the order but did not commit the murder, he will only be charged with manslaughter. Clearly, no man has the right of life and death over a servant. Murder is murder. So where it says his male servant, Rashi attempted to limit this law to non-Hebrew slaves, but the Hebrew text doesn't support his claim. With a rod, Rashbam said that it was a rod commonly used by masters to strike their servants. This part is true. It was a cane pole, not a whip. However, he went on to say that if the master used a sword, it would be considered murder, which is hogwash. Anyway, a servant is punished if it ends in his death is murder or perhaps manslaughter. Under his hand, Maimonides thought that under his hand meant that a man just kept beating the servant, but it was an idiom concerning the person who gave the order. So let me read something that I wrote down about this. Beating a servant within an inch of his life protected the servant from death, right? So there's going to be punishment if he's beaten to death. That protects the servant because it's going to keep the one who's beating him and the one who gave the order from allowing it to go too far. But it also protected the master from a bad investment. And this is what you have to understand why we're going down this road. A lazy slave is a bad investment. The owner could become so frustrated at the lack of work that he would send the slave away, that he might send a slave away. Thus, the slave had committed theft. So instead, the owner could beat the servant. There's a reason for this. Now, remember, these are Jews living in the Jewish land under the Jewish law. So their servant is, it's not going to matter if it's a Jewish servant or a non-Jewish servant. They had the same laws for Jews and non-Jews. But they were allowed to beat their servants if their servants did not do their job. Because what would happen if the servant could not be punished for not doing their job? What happens then? They don't do their job. And this man has already given this servant money because the guy sold himself into indentured servitude, right? So he's paid that man that money. That man's gone off and paid off his debts, or he's blown it, or whatever he's done with the money. That's between him and himself and his family or whatever. But he's already got his money. And he's getting a salary while he's at it. He's getting a place to live. He's getting clothes to wear. He's getting food to eat, that none of which he has to pay for. So that master is making an investment. And he has the right as the master to protect that investment. So if this guy, because think about what's going on in the VA today. The government made a deal with the mob. I mean, what do you call that? The union. No, it's the mob. Made a deal with the mob such that they hire the mob, or hire people who are part of the union to come and work for them. Now, the contract says that they can't be fired for any reason. So guess what happens with the people who work through the union at the VA? They sit around and do nothing. They don't get your medicines ordered. They don't get you in to see the doctors on time. They are rude and crude. I actually had a heart attack. The time I had the heart attack in the VA, I was standing there waiting on a man to talk to me that had Malcolm X posters on his wall. He had "I hate white people" in really big print on his wall. And I had to wait for him to get through talking to all the black people first, even though I was there long before they got there, for him to talk to me. And it wasn't until I had a heart attack and passed out face first on his desk that I finally got some attention. This is what happens in these type of situations. And this is what this is about. This is not about whipping a servant into, just because you're being mad at him, or just because you're an evil person and ought to be whipping somebody. That's the perversion of this law. What this law did was, if you made a deal with a man to do a certain job for a certain fee, which this is all worked out before you become the servant, and then you go in and you decide, I'm not going to do what he asked me to. Well, now he can beat you. What's that going to do? That's going to ensure him that when you get there, you knowing that you could be beaten within an inch of your life is going to make sure that's going to make you do your job. And that's what you're supposed to do, because you're supposed to be a Jew who's also living according to the Torah, doing this. And by God's law, you owe this man an honest day's work for an honest day's pay. So it ensures that you're going to do your job. It was never intended for anyone to ever be beaten. Because if you put the law in place and you go into it knowing that you can be beaten if you don't do your job, odds are you're going to do your job. And that's why the law is there. Right? But it also protects you from some guy just beating you for the heck of it, because it had to be for the offense of you not doing your job. Anyway, did it get perverted? Yes, it did. Yes, it did, because men are men. And particularly when you start trying to apply God's law willy-nilly, we'll live by these laws, but we won't live by those. Well, then you get American slavery. I'm just saying. All right, so let's move on to 21. Well, yeah, I'll see if I can get us through this one. Literally in English, it says, "Indeed, if day or days he stand, not arise for silver heap." Again, you're going to have an idiom that doesn't make sense when you read it this way. Ach, indeed, surely, certainly, no doubt. Im, that's if. Yom is day. It's the day. The primary signification appears to be that of the heat of the day. That's where the idea comes from for the word yom. A period of time in the day when I took them by the hand, as Yirmiyahu or Jeremiah 31:32 says, which was what? 24-hour period? No, it was a 40-year period. A day is a period of time. So the first day in Bereshit, in Genesis, could have referred to a period of time lasting hundreds of millions of years, as 24-hour periods would not have been possible given that the moon was not created until the fourth day. So how are you going to get your orbit if you don't even have the moon? Right? Anyway, this is O, that's the Hebrew word for or. Yomayim, or days. This is the yom in plural. Ya'amod, he stand. It's to stand, to be firm, to sustain, to be propped up, supported, to stand before somebody, as in a king, as in being his servant, to stand firm. So if you stand, lo yikam, and not arise. This is to revenge, to avenge, to be angry, to rebuke, to punish, to inflict penalty. For, the next word is key, so it means for or because. Haspo, we've had this. This is silver. That was their money at the time, so they used the word silver. Then it ends with the word who, which means he. So all that makes no sense, I understand. But here's our translation. Indeed, if day or days he stands, he will not be punished because he is his money. Still doesn't make any sense? Right. So we have idioms here. Indeed, if after 1 or 2 days, that's day or days, it's 1 or 2 days. If after, we would say a couple of days. If after a couple of days, he, speaking of the servant, if after a couple of days he stands. So the servant has been beaten pretty severely. And he's down for the count for 24 hours. Now he's down for, but now the second day, he's like, oh, all right, I'm starting to recover, and he stands up, moves around a bit. He, now this is speaking of the master, will not be punished because he, speaking of the servant, is his purchase. It's his property. He owns him. So he won't be punished because the owner has the right to beat his purchase, his property. Again, I've told you why. Because that assured him that his servant was going to do his job. So if after 1 or 2 days the servant stands, he'll be punished because the servant is his money, because it is his property. So of the words 1 or 2 days, Rashi said that day or days was a 24-hour period which could start at any given moment. Whatever. Nachmanides said it was the day that the servant was struck and the next day. Okay, I agree with that. This verse is in fact saying that if a servant who has been punished with a rod seems fine but dies 24 to 48 hours later, his death cannot be blamed on the punishment. I should say, if it's beyond the 48 hours, his death cannot be blamed on the punishment. There would have been no way to know for sure if the death was truly related to the punishment. One other thing you might think about is, if somebody did die within 3 or 4 days or something like that, nobody would ever make a deal to work for that guy again. Right? It would have its effect. All right, well, I went through that one quick. Let's go on to 22. Ooh, it's a big one. Literally in English, and because strive will men, and strike he, wife pregnant, and he go out he, offspring her, armed, punish he punished. Okay, we don't have time for this. This is a real serious one, and we're going to get into some real serious stuff. So we're going to end here. We'll pick up with verse 22 next week, because we really need to take our time with this one. All right. So, shalom, shalom, y'all.